Like notes through the hourglass, these are the songs of our lives. Welcome to another edition of Songs of Our Lives. I am Brad Rose. I am a musician, a composer, a writer, somebody who thinks about sound an unhealthy amount. And each week I invite on a guest who is, I don't know, someone, sometimes I know them, sometimes I don't. It's always somebody I respect and find interesting. Sometimes they're a musician, sometimes they're not. And we talk about their lives and songs that have sort of come with them along the journey. I guess that's one way to look at it. This week, I'm really, really excited to welcome Robert Aiki Aubrey Lowe, who legitimately responsible for so many of my favorite records over the last few years. His latest is the Grasshopper Republic soundtrack, which, like, you know, one of the things I love about his soundtrack and scoring work is that it makes sense within the context of whatever it is. So, like, this is Grasshopper Republic is a documentary made by Daniel McCabe that is about basically, I believe it's in Uganda, and how there's these grasshoppers that are a delicacy, and it's about trapping and capturing them. And I haven't seen it yet. I've watched the trailer and it looks so fascinating, and I really hope I can see it soon. I haven't figured out anywhere to actually see it yet. But then, you know, he did the Candyman remake, the soundtrack for that. He also did music for the HBO series Telemarketers, which I wasn't even aware of that until we had this conversation, and have since listened to and reviewed that album. And it's wonderful. It's, where I was going with all this is the thing I love about his soundtrack work is that when you see it in the films or in the series, which again, I haven't seen the Grasshopper one, but it always makes sense in that context. But then if you just completely remove it and just listen to it as an album, it just sounds like a really awesome Robert Aiki Aubrey Lowe album. And so that's just kind of a win-win. So I was really excited to get to do this. I gotta mention, he and I have a number of connections. Like, this is the first time we've really talked in depth. But one of them is that we both did records on the late great Type Recordings label, and his, which I'm gonna probably pronounce wrong, and I apologize, Timon Irnak Monta. That's my guess. Legitimately is probably my favorite thing that Type ever put out, which is really saying something if you know the label, because it's one of the best labels of the last like 30 years. But it is a phenomenal album. And so, yeah, I love Type, obviously, but for something to reach the mountaintop of Type for me is something special. So anyway, I'll link that in the show notes. But anyway, we recorded this over Zoom a couple weeks ago, and it was, as it always is, it was such a good time. So I hope you all enjoy it. My guest today is a musician, composer, a film scorer. I don't know if that's really a word. And an artist who has genuinely made a number of my favorite records in the last 20 years. It is Robert Aiki Aubrey Lowe.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. How's it going?
It's going. So I have a story. I think that we've met. I don't, we're going to see if the details are right. And you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that probably was this. So 2008 or 9. So there was, I don't know. I did 2 tours in, it was like 2008, 9, 10, somewhere around there. 2 different bands. Played in Chicago twice. Both times played at Enemy, which I believe was upstairs from, was it called Heaven?
Yeah, Heaven Gallery. Yeah, exactly.
Heaven Gallery. Okay. And so there was one show where I don't remember which one it was, but there was a show going on at Heaven Gallery like the same night, and it was this like, and so I think we met and talked very briefly, and I just remember the thing that sticks out to me is I remembered thinking, because I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and in 2008 there was nothing going on here, and I just remember thinking, wow, this one building has these two like awesome venues, like things going on in one, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. So anyway.
No, for sure. Yeah. No, it was, and especially Chicago Chicago throughout the 90s and early 2000s, like through the aughts. It had a lot going on musically.
Yes.
It was a little more adventurous than most places.
Yeah, it was. Every time we went, I love playing there, and Enemy was a fun space, although loading in was the worst experience imaginable.
The
like
third floor,
yeah,
no elevator.
And not like short floors, like they tall. It was rough. So, and I don't remember if that was because there was one year too that a old sort of mutual, I'm sure we know a lot of the same people, but one of those times, John Twells from Type Records. So John and I, we've known each other forever, and just one of my favorite people in the world. But John met us in Chicago to hang out, and I don't know if it was if it was the same show where that happened, but I know it was a few years later then that, of course, you put out your record on Type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at that point, I was living in New York.
Okay.
But I feel like 2008, 2009, or at some point, because I moved in 2009 to New York from Chicago.
Okay, so it must have been 2008 when that show. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, stroll down memory lane. Anyway. In more recent years, though, so among the various things that you've been doing a lot more like score and soundtrack work. And I'm kind of curious, like, what your first experiences were like with working with film and doing scores.
Well, let's see. The first experience I had was, it was just licensed music. Right around the time I had released my first solo record with the Lycans moniker on Cranky Records. And there was a young filmmaker that had made a short film that was a part of the AFI program, the American Film Institute program, that asked if he could license a piece of music. And I do think that the work that I've made historically, specifically solo work, has lent itself to a cinematic space. So there were a couple instances where my work had been licensed for short films, nothing big. And then in 2010, like shortly after I moved to New York, I was approached by a good friend of mine, Kevin Barker, who was making his first narrative feature called Last Kind Words, which is sort of a gothic ghost story that takes place in Kentucky. And he had asked me if I would do the score. And so I had no real experience actually scoring a film and didn't have really the equipment to do so. So it was very ramshackle. And I was able to get it done. And it was also about problem solving in that space and troubleshooting and figuring out how, I don't have any particularly specific bowed string instruments. So I took a bow to an acoustic steel string guitar for certain things, or used that acoustic guitar as a percussion source, things like that. I was sort of problem solving in the moment, which I think made for, an interesting sonic approach. Then after that, the only thing then over the next few years, I ended up collaborating with other composers on scores that they were making for other films, specifically Johan Johansson. And it was good for me to experience working in that way, because I got a larger, more specific understanding of how potentially I could make work in that space. And also working with Johan at that time was really lovely. We were mutual fans of each other's work and had been friends for a while. And he truly was coming to me for my expertise in the things that I did, and allowing me the space to create those things within the context of the score that he was making. So it was really a collaboration.
Yeah.
It's really lovely.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And so between the 4 films that we worked on together, that was a really nice experience. And then after that, I was approached by an Italian filmmaker to score his film, Il Coppa del Cane, which I worked on from 2018 into 2019, which was also a really nice experience. I had worked on recording things at home, and then took a majority of that work with me to Rome, and then worked in Rome for 2 weeks in a studio with an engineer, and it was just the 2 of us. And at that point I was scoring the pictures. So I would say about 40% of the material in that score was done ahead of time, and then maybe 60% of it was done on site in a recording studio near Chimichita in Rome.
Wow.
So that's
kind of where
that arc, which leads into where we are now, which actually at the time I was in Rome working on that score, I received an email from Monkey Paw. This is February of 2019, asking me if I would potentially be interested or have the availability to have a conversation about doing a score for a horror film that they were currently working on, which was Candyman.
Right. That's amazing. Well, can you tell me about the newest one? So Grasshopper Republic. I haven't seen the film. I've listened to the soundtrack, the score, a number of times. How'd you get involved with that one?
Grasshopper Republic, the filmmaker Daniel McCabe reached out to me, honestly via social media, and asked if I might be interested in potentially doing a score for this film that he was working on, this documentary called Grasshopper Republic, or at the time it was called Nsenne, which is Ugandan for grasshopper. And sent me a 3-minute sizzle in the DM, and I wrote him back. At the time I was in the process of doing a couple other scores, but I said, yeah, let me take a look at it. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And I think it took me a few days, maybe even as long as a week. And then I sat down and watched this 3-minute sizzle reel that he sent, and was so floored by the visual, the work. It was just stunning and really exciting, and made me very interested to speak to him more about the film, what it was, how it came to be. And so, that conversation started. And it was sort of once we had a real conversation about it, it was sort of a no-brainer, that I would want to collaborate with him on making the score for this film.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. I read an article about just the like the what the documentary's about. Like it wasn't specifically about the documentary, but it was I think it was like even like a National Geographic article or something. And I don't know. And then when I got an email about this about your score, I was like, oh wow, like this. I'm really curious to see the documentary just because I found like the article was so interesting and just what it's about. And so, and I'm really having listened to it's always an interesting experience as a listener or as like to hear. So I've heard I've heard your score. I've listened to it a couple times to then see the film later. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all fits together. And,
sure, of course.
And so, well, that's cool. Well, I'm really excited to see what all you have coming next. And, obviously this is the newest thing, but I'm sure you've got tons of irons in the fire. So
I have a couple things going on. And also I just finished the work on this docuseries for HBO called Telemarketers.
Oh, cool.
Which is that was also a really fantastic experience to be able to work on that one. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I clearly have a bias, but it's a really well done series, 3-part, hour-long.
Okay.
I
need to.
series.
I've been wanting to. A friend of mine who's a filmmaker, Black Horse Lowe, has a new series on. I think it maybe just premiered last week on HBO. It's like Navajo PD.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know Black Horse. The episodes of Reservation Dogs that did.
That's
exciting.
I know that. Yeah, so I've been wanting, like, I don't have I was telling my partner, I was like, okay, once more of these episodes are out, we need to do like the free trial and watch all of them. And so I'm going to add this to the list to do because I'm really curious about it. That's cool. Well, awesome. Well, I guess let's get into the meat of this here.
Yeah.
And talk about some songs and stuff.
Do it.
So to start, what is the first song you remember?
So the first song I remember is my father had a cassette of great performances, which was, like a classical music series. And he had Gustav Holst's The Planets. And the first thing I remember, like very, very distinctly, was Mars from Holst's The Planet. And I think that probably had to do with the relationship that I had to, at the time, I was young. I was very young. Star Wars. Because of the relationship between John Williams' theme for the Empire and Mars, like there's quite a correlation. Like there's like if you
that's exactly where my brain goes. Yes.
Yeah. And I think due to that fact, that's something that I really attached myself to. Like, sure, I remember the Williams score, but I think due to the nuance and the power of that particular performance on that cassette of Mars really drew me in. And I thought, where is this? It was something that was really effective.
Yeah, no, that makes so. Yeah, the Star Wars connection. I think I'd sort of subconsciously made that, and then as soon as you said that, I was like, oh my god, that's what it is. That's where my brain kept going.
It really is.
But that's such a I think that's such an interesting thing too for when you're young. Like those are the kind of things that like being able to make those connections from something like Star Wars to something like this. I think it just makes that the thing like Mars or whatever it is makes such a stronger impression and makes you, like, to me, it like draws you to it.
Yeah.
And I think those are really cool things. So
that's where that comes from. That's the first thing that comes to mind when I think about
what an early memory. Gosh. It's like such an epic piece of music.
Yeah. And I think I was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, maybe.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. I one time, I don't know how old I was. I must have been teens, maybe. I saw a thing at a planetarium that was with the planets, and it was awesome. It was so cool.
Yeah. I love planetariums.
I know. I feel like, I don't know when the last time I was at one, but my daughter is 10, and I don't think we've ever taken her to one. And I'm like, okay, that's something we need to do.
Yeah, should get on that.
That's just a cool experience.
It's a great experience.
Okay, well, on a kind of different tangent, what is a song that'll usually make you cry?
So I thought about this one a lot. I think that there are, I would say that there are probably a couple. The one that I went to specifically was Mesmerism by Dead Can Dance, and that's due to a very specific experience that I had. I'm a fan of Dead Can Dance and had never seen them, and I was doing a performance at this festival called Primavera Sound in Porto, Portugal, and they were performing, and I just remember watching them for the first time, and this was probably 2011. I think it was 2011. And I just remember standing on a hillside above where the staging was, which it was quite a large stage. But I was standing on the hillside with my friend David, and we were both standing there watching Dead Can Dance, and it was just sort of an emotional moment. Like I felt tears almost welling up. I did not cry, but I think that it put me in this space where that was something for me that when I think about that and when I listen to that tune in particular, that's one example. But yeah, so I would say between that and the Yusuf Islam, or Cat Stevens as he used to be called, but Yusuf Islam, the main theme to Harold and Maude is actually another one that I think, seeing that film at the time that I did and having this real love of Hal Ashby's work, it was a very emotional film for me. And actually, you know what? So I'll say this. I think that there are several songs in this list that I would say could be like sort of flip.
Right.
I'm actually going to wait to bring up the Yusuf Islam. Let's continue on, and I'll get back to that, because I think that it could work here, but I think it could work elsewhere within the Okay.
No, that I think I've had experiences like that where I just it's happened like at a live performance of like someone I maybe never thought I would get to see or something, and there is just a point where, like you described, this emotion just comes over you, sometimes kind of out of nowhere, where you're just kind of in the moment. It's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm going to just start, like, I'm just going to kind of lose it here. And it's beautiful and kind of wonderful. And that's like, Mesmerism. I just really like that song. I love the vocals on that song. That's one of the things that It just, it's so good. It's so good. Well, kind of on the opposite side of that, what's the song that always puts you in a better mood?
A song that always puts me in a better mood is the song that I heard, and it was from an African music series on the late 50s that were recordings, field recordings by Hugh Tracy, who was an ethnomusicologist who spent most of his time exploring the music and sound of Africa, similarly to how Lomax, Alan Lomax was doing in the US. But Hugh Tracy was in this village in Kenya, and the Kipsigi tribe, he recorded a song called Chemirocha, which the young villagers had made after hearing a 78 recording of Jimmy Rogers.
Wow.
Yeah. So Chemirocha, apparently, I don't know exactly how it happened, but I'm pretty sure missionaries had gone to this particular village a few years before and had brought like a Victrola of some kind, and had a Jimmy Rogers record, which they played for the young people of the tribe. And they were having a debate amongst themselves about who this person was, and, was he half man, half ibex? Was he, and so basically, never hearing an American yodeler, they wrote this song to invite Jimmy Rogers, to come and sing and dance with them. And it's a beautiful piece of music. There's something that's ecstatic and really pure about it. And no matter what, I think that one is one that would put me in a...
Yeah, I hadn't heard this. I know I've heard a number of like the Hugh Tracy things, but I hadn't heard this particular compilation, which I want to go listen to the whole thing. But yeah, I felt like there was this really, it's like this quiet ecstasy and this like really gentle kind of power to it that it was like soothing, but also really just kind of get your blood flowing. And I loved it so much. I was so glad to hear it.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent piece of music. It's so good. It's so amazing.
And I love the Jimmy Rogers connection. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I had no idea what a story.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
And then when like hearing you like saying the name of the title out loud, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's the best. I love it. That's the best thing for me doing this show is I get to learn about and hear about so much music that I've missed or didn't know about. And it makes my day like every time.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great.
Well, what is objectively the best song of all time?
Objectively. Yeah. They're all tough questions. I think this is probably one of the tougher questions because, I don't know that will ever be an answer for that.
Of course.
Question for me, but I would say Soup to Nuts, the song or the piece of music that I have played for more people, I think, than any other would be Ghosts by Japan. Something that means a lot to me. I think it's sort of in a way a perfect song. I'm a huge fan of David Sylvian. I mean, Japan in and of itself, like Nick Carnes bass playing, like everything about that group, I was a huge fan of. And I think it was honestly years ago seeing footage of Japan doing a version of this song on the Old Grey Whistle Test with Ryuichi Sakamoto playing the second Prophet 5 on stage with them. I think that seeing that footage is what put it over the top for me. But then I constantly will go back and back to that piece of music. It's an awesome song.
Oh, yeah. I feel like this song has just blown my mind for years and years. And and in some way, like there's something kind of inexplicable about it to me in the way that I don't know how they make it work the way that it works.
Right. Yeah.
Like you could take, it's almost like there's two separate songs happening and they
Absolutely.
put it together and
yes, there's something about how time is stretched within that definitive period of linear time.
Yeah.
It just moves and shifts in so many different ways. And there are percussive elements that are not overbearing, or you don't like really find yourself latched on to any sort of a beat, but there is that element there. There's all of the sort of ethereal movement of the synthesizers and, not necessarily grabbing onto the idea of a pad or a chord. It just, everything is floating. And I think ultimately, like everything about like every aspect of that song works. And it's such an apt title, clearly.
Right.
For what it is.
Yeah, no, I love this. I think that's such a good explanation of it too. But I've had similar experiences where I've played this for people who hadn't heard it, and people don't know what to think, but in like a good way. It's like I don't understand this, but it's
And I think
but that's a sign of something great.
I think also you'll find, in the things that I highlight in this list, it always comes back to this idea of the ecstatic. No matter what it is, I find this sort of ecstatic nature of the material in all of these things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, to kind of turn this around completely, and what's a song that you used to love, but now you find it pretty cringeworthy?
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be Remixed to Ignition by R. Kelly.
Yeah,
because I used to. Yeah, that was for me. That was a banger, and it was especially living in Chicago for as long as I did. That was, I mean,
right.
This sort of. It's funny thinking about this term now with where we are in 2023, but how he was sort of considered the Pied Piper. Of Chicago. Which was something that was thrown around a lot. And I can't get anywhere near it anymore. Like I've extinguished like any bit of his catalog from my life. But I would definitely say that's one that sat very highly for me for a very long time until like it all became very
painfully obvious.
Right. And I was like, we're good. I'm good. We're done. No thanks.
Yeah. I mean, there was probably a period in my life where I would tell you this was like the best pop song ever or something, but I can't. And I always think it's an interesting, and this is I do another podcast about the punk band Rancid, and it's a long story I won't get into, but one of the things that we talk about all the time is, like there are things like this where it's like there are things that you loved at some point, and then at some point, like maybe the people who made them are objectively terrible or something,
right. Yeah, of course.
And it's like, what is the line? And it's, and it's one of those things where, I mean, cause there's stuff that I listen to now and love. And I'm guessing that the people who make it aren't the best people in the world, but there's a line in there. Obviously, like R. Kelly is so far over that line. But I always think that's an interesting thing. Like it's something I think about a lot, especially because like Rancid, there's a lot of questionable things there, but it was like this very formative thing in my youth was like West Coast punk, and especially those guys, and but the remix,
Ignition, no thanks.
Yeah,
too bad.
Well, let's not talk about R. Kelly anymore, and let's turn it around. Let's talk about a song that a lot of people, most people, however you want to create this context for this, but a song that people hate but you love it.
Okay, so to give some context to this one, I became a fan of Yoko Ono's work when I was probably like 19 or 20 years old. The first time I heard the album Fly, I was like, what is this magic? And I became completely ensorcelled by this track, Mind Train. And it's talk about like a banger. Like it trucks. And I mean, it does give you the experience of, a train. Like it's just moving and it goes for a long time. And I think at the time that I became really interested in Yoko Ono's work, not only the sonic work, but also just her work as a Fluxus artist, I became very engaged with her practice before John Lennon and then after. And there weren't a lot of people at the time that would come along with me on that ride. I think at this stage, I think that there are a lot more people. I think she's more widely appreciated,
right,
for the work that she's done historically. But early on, I was like all in, like anything I could find, I was super excited about, and I felt like this was an artist that it took other people a little longer to catch the vibe. But I would when I would DJ, sometimes when I was around that age, I would put that on and just let it jam. And
oh man,
and I was like, I just had the confidence to do it because I loved it so much. And it was it's such a jam. It's such a cut.
Oh my God.
And I think more people get it now, but I think at the time, the circles at least that I found myself in, people did not appreciate the magic that is Yoko Ono.
Yeah, I love this answer because I had a pretty similar experience. I think it was probably like in my early 20s when I really kind of fell in love with her work, and it was a similar experience that most of the people I knew, they weren't there, and it was just like, you kind of be like, but I think I think she's like one of the greatest vocalists ever. The way she contorts her voice on this piece and just I don't even know. It's one of those things, kind of like we were talking about with Japan. It's like, I don't know how this is possible.
Right. And I think honestly, I definitely say Yoko Ono as an early influence on me as far as vocal work is concerned. Between, especially for Yoko Ono, Diamante Galas, Robert Wyatt are all real heavy hitters for me as far as how they use their voices in that space. And they're talking within the context of, popular Western music, specifically popular Western music. American and, English, British music. But yeah, she was very much, and I feel like you can hear that in my work, even before I was more concentrated on solo work when I was playing in bands, and not only lyrical content, but also the ways in which I was exploring how I could use my body and my voice to create these sounds and utilize it as more of an instrument, as opposed to, even though I was using it as a vehicle for language, but being able to find my way into that where the movement and the gesture of the sound was just as important as the lyrical content.
Yeah, that was this. There's this physicality to her, the like the way she sings and uses her voice that I think that it's so much more than just the voice, like you were saying. And I think that's really interesting. I can hearing you say that, and it's like, yeah, I can see that. That makes sense. Like with your work, that's really cool. She's amazing. I love Yoko Ono.
Oh yeah, so incredible.
Well, what is the most romantic song?
So my answer to this was Sweetest Taboo by Sade, which I do feel. And once again, like leading into this idea of the ecstatic, I think that you find that within this. But I mean, there are others songs, and I'll now on back to the Yusuf Islam. I think that Trouble could also be considered a very romantic song due to the nature of how it was used within the context of Hal Ashby's Harold and Maude. So yeah, there are definitely, I can find different pathways for different songs, and they're sort of this multi-layered sort of experience that you can have with a piece of music.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think Sade is absolutely incredible, amazing, and yeah, you feel it. You just, I don't even know what else to say about it. But she's an artist that, you know, hands down, like give it up. Super incredible, the work that she's done, period. And this there's definitely a romance,
right,
and not, you know, not a syrupy, sugary one, but something that is, you know, is once again like very complex and much deeper.
Yeah, there's a real gravity to it. I think it's amazing to me that, so I think this is the 10th one of these that I've recorded, and it's taken 10 episodes for someone to say Sade on this answer, because every time I'm like, wow, I know, because that's like one of the first places my brain goes is I really like the Yusuf Islam answer too. I think that's a really, because in the context of Harold and Maude, that is such a good shout out.
I mean, I think it is very romantic, and it's very sad. So yeah, it's there's something that's melancholy about, God, I'm getting choked up about it already. There's something that's very melancholy about it, but also something that's very deeply warming and just loving about that song.
Yeah. I love both of those. They both count. I don't know what that means, but well, what's a song that changed your perspective on an artist?
So I was familiar with the group Talk Talk sort of as a pop group, sort of, you know, very active and poppy. And then when I started to hear the later material, like Laughing Stock, once again finding this complexity in the work that they've done, you know, throughout the course of the career of Talk Talk, then especially after the fact, Mark Hollis' solo record, like Mark Hollis is up there for me, like with David Sylvian, you know, and Yoko Ono and Robert Wyatt as like such an incredible voice. Like there's something about how he imparts this, you know, this storytelling, everything about Hollis and Mark Hollis, and you know, and I started once I listened to Newgrass and Taphead and everything on that record, I went back and started to listen to things that were a little earlier, and also The Color of Spring. Like that's when it like takes off for me. And I love Talk Talk across the board. I think that all the work that Talk Talk did was great, and I find it very enjoyable. But I think particularly when I heard Newgrass, that song, there was something that was it was just, I don't know, so rich.
Yeah, I make notes on all of these things, so I have something to talk about. But like, I mean, I love Talk and talking about the complexity of this song. To me, there's, and I feel like this is like a recurring theme, but these like things that there's these sort of like this dichotomy of it's like it's so sort of fragile and delicate, but it's so heavy at the same time.
Absolutely, and yeah.
I think that's such it's a special thing, like to tap into that, and especially the way he does it on this song. Oh my gosh, it's just so like beautiful and moving and overwhelming.
Yeah, that's it's something very real.
Yeah. Well, what are your favorite lyrics? Whether it's a whole song, a line from a song.
I had a couple for this one, but the one that sort of reigns supreme is "Eternally Yours" by the Eternals, which is a group comprised of Damon Locks and Wayne Montana, who were also in the group Trenchmouth with Fred Armisen and Krista Zuter. This was early on in the creation of the Eternals. They wrote this song, and every time I would hear them perform this live, and this is probably 1998, 1999 in Chicago, and I saw them as often as I could because it was just such an incredible thing to experience this group. But I mean, every word in this song is really amazing, but the final passage, when the smoke clears and the noise dies down, on the final day, invaders will be done. And when that day arrives, I'll wear my finest threads. I'll comb the hair on my head. Remember the things you said. Beware of snipers who do not carry guns with poison gas in their lungs. They speak of assassination when the smoke clears. It's heavy as fuck. Fucking incredible. It's ultra poetic and incredibly pointed. Like everything about it. Damon's delivery of the lyrics, also the musical content of the song, like everything about it is something that for me has always stuck with me. And I'm so glad I got to experience in a live setting so many times.
No.
Every time it would hit me that much harder.
Right.
So yeah.
When I was listening to it over the weekend, I was like, God, this song is it's what, 20 something years old now at this point. Mm-hmm. It's just as prescient today as it.
It's extraordinarily prescient in this moment in time, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, that for me is the pinnacle peak. Amazing. But then also I was thinking a lot about the lyrical work of Daniel Higgs in Lungfish, and how that also was very formative for me. But on Lungfish's last record, Barrel Hymns, there's a song called "Way Out is the Way Out," and there's a particular line on that song which he says, "Adrift in the bowels of the Lord," and that's just that line is such, like, it really it hits. But I'm this one I'm giving to the Eternals. But
it's always never a bad thing to shout out Dan Higgs, and I love Dan Higgs. And I was saying this to somebody over the weekend. I was having a moment because listening to this, it just kind of sent me down a Lungfish rabbit hole, and I think it was yesterday. It's like I'm having a Lungfish is the greatest band of all time moment.
Yeah, it's that's a real
thing.
You
can make that art. Oh gosh,
it's a real thing.
Yeah, Daniel Higgs is amazing, but Damon Locks. There was,
and I've
had a conversation.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I've known both of them the same amount of time. I befriended both of them when I was 17 years old. So at this point in time, I have known both Daniel and Damon for 31 years.
Wow.
A long time. And stay in close contact with both. I just recently saw both of them.
And both are still like doing so much great stuff. I mean,
absolutely.
I was having a conversation with somebody a couple weeks ago, and they were like, "Who are some of like great contemporary lyricists?" And Damon Locks was one of the first people that came to mind. I was like,
Yeah.
dude. So I was really excited to see this on here because, yeah, that amazing song and that last verse gives me chills just thinking about it. Okay, so now we're gonna get into this section where you picked two of the questions from the other ones. And so the next question is, what song have you or can you listen to the most?
There's a song by Phil Coran, and Phil Coran was this multi-instrumentalist from Chicago, who made beautiful, incredible music. And there was a piece of music called Theme, African Skies. And it's just such a lovely, uplifting work. Over and over again, I could listen to that. I would never tire of it. I mean, there are a lot of songs out there that I feel carry a similar weight, but I would definitely say that that's one for me that I can go back to. And he would perform every Friday night at Ethiopian Diamond, which was an Ethiopian restaurant in Chicago. Oh, wow. So you could sit and listen to him as you were having dinner. Play kalimba or mbira or the harp. Like, it just really incredible.
Wow.
Incredible stuff.
That's incredible.
Not talked about enough.
Oh my gosh.
Phil Coran.
Yeah. I'd never actually heard this, and I was blown away. It's so beautiful. Yeah, it's
incredible, right?
Yeah, I'm really excited to explore more of this music because this piece was just. Whew. Do you remember when you first heard it? Was it just like being in Chicago? And
I first heard it. I bought a CDR off of him at a performance that he did, where he had a collection of works and recordings over the years that he would sell as CDRs at shows. And it was eventually properly issued as an LP, on an LP, through a small Chicago label, probably around 2000, I don't know, probably around 2006, 5 or 6, something around there. And I can't remember the name of the label, unfortunately, but I'm so happy to see that it exists in the world, continues to exist in the world. Like all of Phil Coran's stuff, the Heritage Ensemble, the Memorial for Malcolm X, like all of this work is really incredible.
Yeah. Memorial for Malcolm X. I knew that. I think I have a copy of that. But this one was totally new and
really, really great.
So what was the last song that you completely fell in love with?
I think the last song I completely fell in love with, and this was during the pandemic, during the lockdown during the pandemic. My wife and I were taking to find things to watch, and Steve McQueen, who is one of my favorite filmmakers, had just made a series of films called Small Acts. And the second film in the series, called Lover's Rock, after Mangrove, which was the first film, takes place at it's a house party sound system. And it was interesting to be immersed in that space for the length of the film because, we were in the process of isolating from each other and wearing masks and keeping a distance. And everyone in this film is so close together, and everyone, their energy is so electric, but the DJs at the sound system made a point of playing Kunta Kinte dub by the Revolutionaries. And after the song plays through, everyone in the party is just wants it to go again. So they play it a second time, and then they play it a third time. So hearing that song 3 times in a row in real time in this sequence was really amazing. And once again, ecstatic, really incredible. And that's the last song that I heard that just pushed everything over the top. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Being able to experience it in that way.
Song. Oh my gosh. I haven't seen that film. I'm really curious about it, but it's not going to hit the same way as it would have in the middle of lockdown.
Yeah. It was, so good.
Yeah. I really love this piece of music. It's, it's just, I especially love the, it's like that lead synth, but it kind of sounds like a flute. And
it's so good.
That melody is just, it's like haunting and incredible. So good. Okay, so now we're coming to the home stretch here, and these are the two that we skipped earlier. We're gonna come back to the two big ones, if you will. So what's the song that means the most to you? And it's not even necessarily because of the song itself, but you associate it with something or someone that's important to you, something along those lines.
I would say that would have to be Alice Coltrane's Journey in Satchidananda. And I think it's important to me just because of the weight of it, the spirit of it. It's something that I discovered, early on when I was younger, and something that has always stuck with me. I actually also thought about John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, but this for me was something that sort of carried it over even more. And I think my exploration of the ecstatic, I think this one just hits the nail on the head for me a little bit more. And it's a piece of music that I will carry for me, and her spirituality within that space, and her energy and her being within that space, I think is something that I relate to in this way that I can't get away from it. And I think it's infectious in that way. I think so many other people also have that and carry that with themselves.
Yeah, I'm not sure like there's anybody's music like in the history of the world that sort of has moved me or affected me like as much as Alice Coltrane's. Everything you're saying resonates very deeply with me. It's impossible for me to like, if I hear this, it's impossible for me to not just kind of get taken to another place.
Yeah.
And I have often said, like, if I was stuck on an island and I could only listen to one artist for the rest of my life, it would probably be Alice Coltrane.
Yeah.
Like, and Pharaoh on here
shit,
too,
man.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Geez. I mean, this is like, and two of these all-time great, amazing people at the height of their powers.
Yeah.
And just.
But also, speaking of John and Pharaoh, that probably leads us to the final question.
Yes, which is, what is your favorite song?
My favorite song is the Holy Ghost himself, Albert Ayler, Love Cry. And I think also going back to this idea of vocalizations and finding space to explore things in different ways. The first time I heard Love Cry, it just put me in another space. And I think with Ayler is an artist that I respond to on all levels at all times. And like his body of work is so expansive for me. And I love it so much. I love everything he did, the way he talks about it in interviews. But Love Cry, like these sort of ecstatic vocalizations that happen in that piece of music, like lift me up in a way that most other things can't, and very few things can.
Yeah.
And I think, Ayler for me, and the famous quote is, Train was the father, Pharaoh was the son, and I'm the Holy Ghost. And I fucking fully believe it. Like,
absolutely.
Dude operated on such an advanced level. Like, no one else can touch it. No one else can touch it.
Yeah, I mean, where it's like, what, 50 years on and still, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's untouchable. And then, I mean, and then Milford.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
those two together. I mean, there's this, I don't know, there's this connection there that the way they seem to communicate through sound and,
I mean, it's overwhelming. And also, I mean, once again, this one can go back to like several other questions. Like, it can bring me to fucking tears, this piece of music.
Right.
Oh man, it's so incredible. And so I would definitely put that up there. It's like, Eiler is like no other.
Yeah. Well, that is a beautiful place to end. I really appreciate you doing this. This was a whole lot of fun.
Thanks.
And so Grasshopper Republic is out.
Grasshopper Republic is out November 17th on Invada Records. 17th. And the Telemarketers score is out digitally on Invada now. And the physical release is coming. Like, we're just waiting for that one. But yeah, Grasshopper Republic, Telemarketers, Invada Records. Check it out.
Check it out. All right. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you
appreciate
so much.
it.
Of course.
Once again, a billion thanks to Robert Aiki Aubrey Lowe. That was so much fun. God, so many great picks. I've been listening to the playlist for his episode for the last couple weeks, and I'm just, it's so good. Check out Grasshopper Republic. When this airs, it will be out. It is on the Invada label, who also put out Telemarketers soundtrack, which is also good. And go and spend some time on Robert's Bandcamp page. There is so much incredible music up there. But those albums are up there. The Type record I mentioned, a lot of stuff that this is the only place you can hear it, I think. There's just some really great stuff. There's a really great collab with Alan Licht. And the record he did with Ariel Kalma. I mean, it's the good stuff, guys. It's the good stuff. That is it for me, though. As always, check out the playlist of Robert's picks. Link is in the show notes. Join us over on Patreon, patreon.com/Foxy Digitalis. If you enjoy these episodes as much as I do, you get them a week early and you get extra bits for each episode. There's a whole Patreon section and they're a lot of fun. And there's also other stuff on the Patreon, and it keeps all this going and churning along. And also really hoping to amp up the Patreon a bit so that I can get someone to work with to help on the production end of these, just to make everything better. And, so that's all. Oh, and you can holler at me on all over social media, send me an email, whatever, or not, ignore me. That's cool too. Whatever you do, keep listening to whatever the hell you want.